My parents never failed to tell me how when I was born, she had an expression of pure joy as she held me for the first time. When I started going to school, she was up at the crack of dawn every morning to help haul me from my cozy bed, into my school uniform, and to see me off. She was there every afternoon to receive me home when my parents were busy at work, there to ask me how my day in school had been. I told her I liked the boy at kindergarten. There was a part of me which knew that maybe this was something I shouldn't tell my parents. But being my confidant, she was the first to know. Guess what she told me? She said that she would break his legs if he ever made me upset. I know, right? Not the typical reaction you'd expect, and not one I expected either. But her love for me had always been unconventional and unconditional. It showed me how she anticipated and prioritized my feelings above hers, and how my happiness came first to her. At home, my parents raised me to be independent, to take care of myself. But she spoon-fed me when I visited her until I was 11, treating me like a princess and never getting angry at me. Whenever I thanked her for anything, her standard reply was, 家人是不用谢的, translating to, you don't need to thank me, I'm your family. She was at every one of my award ceremonies with her camera out. Looking back, I realized there were plenty of photos taken of me, but not so many of her and I. She loved me so much that I was always the focus. The great she I've been referring to is none other than my grandmother, who loved and doted on me just as I loved her. Of all the lessons she's taught me, there's one that remains the closest to my heart, what it looks like to be truly loved. This love is the knowledge that there is someone who will stay with you even if the rest of the world decides to leave you behind. This is a love felt deeper than any other. So having experienced this love greater than anything I have known begs the question, why am I sitting here today to tell you that love has a limit? To be told that love has no limit is a common experience. Maybe you heard it in the form of love knows no boundaries, or love triumphs all. Whether you've seen it in movies, read it in books, heard it from your parents, or felt it through poetry. Just as Shakespeare once said in one of the greatest works of literature written, I shall but love thee better after death. For the longest time we are led to believe love can be as such, endless. That reality for me was shattered by my grandma's sudden diagnosis with cancer. It had come as a great shock to my family because she had always been highly conscious of her health. Each week I visited her in the hospital, she got weaker and more frail. Her appearance changed drastically, and it came to a point where my loud, lively grandma could no longer speak or even open her eyes. But up till then, she gathered her energy to welcome me with a smile and a tired but enthusiastic greeting each time I stepped into her room to visit her. Seeing her bones sharply visible because of the weight she had lost, I was almost afraid to be near her. I was so ashamed of myself for my fear for someone I knew I loved so deeply. It was a heartbreaking realization that she had become a shadow of her previous self. For 2 years, my grandma fought a losing battle hard. She passed away on the 15th of March, 2021. It was only then that I realized that even the greatest love is deterred by the cruel line between the world of the living and the dead. Working through the stages of grief was incredibly tiring. Disbelief and denial that made me refuse to look into the casket at her wake, not wanting my last memory of her to be lifeless and cold. The anger that made me question, why her? The undulating waves of sadness, making me painfully aware of my loss. But I refused to enter the final stage of grief, acceptance. The people around me constantly told me things like, eventually we have to move on, or this will pass. I felt like nobody understood. To me, acceptance meant that my grief would wear off, that I would gradually become used to losing someone I love so dearly. I feared so deeply that acceptance would lead me to forgetting who my grandma once was to me. Everyone I talked to was so focused on trying to help me move forward, when really what I needed was more time to come to terms with my loss. That is, everyone except one of my closest friends, who was going through the same thing as me during that time. In my fear and pain, I realized that there was someone who would not hurry me to move on. But instead, we understood each other's needs and related our experiences. As cliché as it might sound, we were there for each other, whether we needed a listening ear, someone to make us laugh, or just a shoulder to cry on during the darker moments. The limitless love that I thought existed was something of a fantasy. Fantasies don't include repercussions, and neither does the love that exists within them. This realization was what taught me another kind of love. Fearful, hesitant love. The hesitant love that I returned to after my grandma passed away was like an invisible wall between me and my family, me and my friends. Hesitant love looks like a line that you're too afraid to cross, all too aware of the unknown that lies beyond the line that you think will only hurt you. It feels like the constant struggle between the longing to love someone wholly and the need you feel to cultivate detachment, so the inevitable loss is less heartbreaking. Hesitant love is the limit we impose on ourselves because we live in fear of a love that is temporary. So how did I grow my hesitant love back into one that was whole? Grieving with someone who knew what I was going through helped me realize that I could move on without giving up the love my grandma had taught me. Acceptance did not mean that I was going to forget. Acceptance was what would help me by preventing my grief from making me shut people out. I finally realized that I wasn't with my family, who needed me during that time just as much as I needed them. Instead, acceptance allowed me to continue to honor my grandma by being the friend she would have been and loving others the way she loved me. In this friendship, there was space for my grief, but also space for the joy that came from honoring my grandma's memory through the way I connected with others. Love brings so much closeness, but hesitant love only creates distance when what we truly need is support from one another. Apart from that, I discovered my own ways of remembering her in my daily life. This necklace is one that she wore daily for decades, even before I was born. It's something that she left to me, and my way of carrying a tangible part of her memory with me every day. So think of a time where you've held back because you've been afraid to take that leap of faith. This is to everyone who's ever felt that you have to have walls up, even around your family. This is to everyone who can't seem to fully trust your friends. This is to everyone who is afraid to share openly because you feel misunderstood. I have felt the pain that you feel and cried the tears that you have cried. But the emotions that we confine because of these fears cause many a missed connection and many an eventual regret. As I experienced this friendship and grief together with someone who understood, I wondered, why do we stop ourselves from living so much more just so that the eventual loss hurts a little less? Let me ask you that again. Why do we stop ourselves from loving so much more just so that our eventual loss of the love hurts a little less? This is a wonder of the heart, or maybe of the mind, that I cannot give you the answer to. But what I do know is this. Just because the love that we know is not eternal does not mean that it's not worth experiencing. Losing the person you love does not mean that you have completely lost the love that existed between you. Each love is a journey that we have to take, and each one teaches a lesson worth our while. Pain is inevitable, but so is joy. In my case, it's the joy of honoring my grandma by loving others the way she's loved me. Let's not lose ourselves in our pain, and never let our loss be greater than our love. How will you love and be loved the same way if you're not willing to try? We may not be able to love endlessly, but let's love wholly. I love my grandma no less than I ever have, and her great love continues to live on vicariously through the way I love those around me. One day, I will return to dust, and this love will reach its limit of existence. But I'll go knowing that I love wholly with no regrets. So what's stopping you from doing the same? Thank you.